Hello there, fellow zombie slayers. My name is Stanley557, Anfang, Vanguard Zombies' first offering, and as the day goes on, one of the series' worst received launches since Black Ops 4, a game that released in an incomplete state. Much like the fears that surrounded Cold War Zombies following the game's release last year, Vanguard Zombies, similarly created by Treyarch, has finally answered the fears that players had a year ago. Anfang is a lackluster, corporate-guided attempt to create a zombies mode to entice players dumb enough to purchase the game under the guise of a well-made, fleshed-out zombies mode. Ever since the failure of Black Ops 4, Zombies has been giving a smaller and smaller budget, to the point where we've now arrived at Anfang, one of the worst maps in Zombies history. But what does this map have to actually offer? Well, let's find out. Following the end of the war, the Nazis scoured the globe in search of artifacts that could help them turn the tide of the war. Soon after the discoveries made at End Station by Dr. Vogel, many of the artifacts collected begin to reactivate, revealing the demonic gods that rule over the Dark Aether. Korifex the Deathless, a demonic god removed from his throne, grants the power to revive the dead to the Uberfuhrer Wolfram von List, the antagonist of the series. Heading back to Stalingrad, the location of the Nazis' greatest defeat, von List uses the powers granted to him to revive the dead soldiers and take back what is rightfully theirs. Alongside the demonologist Gabriel Kraft, our heroes must investigate the now retaken city of Stalingrad and figure out what's going on. The introduction of the story is honestly quite good, and sets the stage for a fun and engaging Indiana Jones-like story. Using the portals and Outbreak-like setup, we could have traveled to different regions and locations, hopping between temples and ancient civilizations, collecting artifacts, and thwarting von List at every turn. So then why does the gameplay look like this?
This cannot be allowed!
Anfang, much like Outbreak, requires the player to hop between different zones, but unlike Outbreak, uses Stalingrad as its map's central hub. As players complete objectives in the early rounds, they'll be granted different perks and more play space. The first few locations players region hop between are actually just different buildings that encompass the city. After you complete the objective, the area will then be opened up to you. The problem being is that besides Pack, there's literally nothing new to any of these areas. Pack-a-Punch, the Covenant Altar, the crafting table, and the ammo cache are all offered to players when they initially open the map. Further unlocking areas doesn't grant the players that many more tools to their arsenal. The same can be said for the lack of wall buys, and all the weapons being placed inside of one mystery box that stays stagnant at one location. Players are no longer incentivized to do anything at the central hub besides upgrading, and maybe build a few extra points and traverse to the next region. All the side areas don't really feel like they're very much lived in, and there's no reason to go outside the main central hub where Pack-a-Punch can be found. The unique regions and objective maps include the varying buildings that surround Stalingrad, a windmilled orchard and rooftops of France, and literally just the main HUD of Shinonuma. And unlike Outbreak, where each region provides players with a massive sandbox to explore, Anfang drops players off into tiny little pit stops that could barely pass for survival maps. One of the locations is literally a tiny stairwell, with the player only being able to walk up and down the stairs. These locations are pitiful and offer nothing to the player to do besides to complete the objectives that will take them about 3 minutes to complete. Seriously, much like Cold War surface level content that can be completed and played through in about a day, all of Anfang's experiences can be viewed in as little as 20 minutes, with currently only 3 micro-objectives with no main quest to boot. Transmit is much like Outbreak's Escort. Players must escort an ethereal orb around the map's tiny play space. After spending about a minute or two walking the orb around the map, players have already completed the objective. This mission is commanded by Belikar, the Warlock. Apparently, completing this mission sends out a message to other Dark Aether entities to come to their aid. The next objective is Blitz, commanded by Invictor, the Destroyer. Being locked within the location, players must survive the total time before being released. And finally, there's Harvest, led by Sariex the Shadow. Players must feed her runes dropped by zombies. Players feed her these runes by depositing what you've collected into the Sin Eater. Once the Sin Eater has been fed 3 times, the mission is complete. Completing these objectives rewards players with bonus salvage and points, but much like completing an objective in Outbreak, players can use what they've earned to upgrade their armor, purchase weaponry, perk upgrades, and roll the mystery box. Speaking of, let's talk about the changes that are made to the perks. Unlike Cold War's out-of-game permanent upgrade system, Vanguard has players upgrading their perks in-game. The biggest change is the perk being free upon the first purchase, with subsequent purchases costing 2,500 for Tier 2, 5,000 for Tier 3, and 7,500 for Tier 4. Unlike Cold War, though, where each consecutive tier adds an additional effect to the perk, each tier of Vanguard simply increases the perk's main effect, rather than granting an additional one. For example, Quick Revive no longer grants the player increased revive speed and increased health regeneration. Now the perk only grants the player the increased health regeneration, with each tier upgrade simply increasing the perk's ability to recover health. Same can be said for Jug, which at base increases the player's health by 25 hit points, with each subsequent purchase granting additional 25 hit points for a maximum of 200. Deadshot no longer grants the player the base ability to snap at the head, instead only increasing the damage performed by a headshot, with each purchase simply increasing the damage dealt. Speed Cola increases reload speed with each purchase, increasing the speed by small increments. And finally, Stamina Up simply increases the player's movement speed while running, with each purchase adding more of an increased speed boost. These are easily some of the worst innovations we've ever seen in the perk system in ages. Sure, it simplifies the process, but it no longer feels rewarding. It simply feels like an obligation that must be fulfilled to power up. It's a very similar controversy thrown the Pack-a-Punch's way in Black Ops 4. Players aren't getting much of an increase out of each upgrade, and instead of just allowing the player to purchase the maximum effect for 5,000 points, the player must painstakingly repack 4 times. In Vanguard, for the player to get the maximum effect out of the perk fountains, players must purchase the same perk 4 separate times, with each tier hardly adding upon the last one. It no longer feels satisfying, and it feels more like a point sink because the developers want us to spend our points on something, and God forbid we have a large amount of points in our inventory. Speaking of points, Anfang follows the Outbreak reward system of 20 points per standard kill and 30 instead of 35 per critical kill or headshot. So, unless you're earning points for completing objectives, the point gain is also extremely unsatisfying. The reason this system worked in Outbreak was because the game was allowed to fill each region with hundreds of zombies, so the overall point value had to be reduced to compensate. But in Anfang, the player will encounter anywhere between 5 and 50 zombies per objective. Even in the main hub, players will fight around 40 zombies before being forced to enter the portal to earn more points. These systems are terrible, and it's not like there's an infinite spawn of zombies either. It just feels like most of the time the game's hardly trying to throw enemies at you in the first place. One of the changes I did enjoy, though, was the removal of the weapon rarity system. In Cold War, not only had the player had to pack their weaponry, but also the weapon's rarity. While I understand the idea to keep weapons balanced so you couldn't spawn in with an extremely destructive LMG, the whole system was cumbersome and not very friendly to new players, as the game hardly conveys this idea and how to upgrade in the first place. Thankfully in Vanguard, weapon tiers and damage are all responsibilities handed back to the Pack-a-Punch. Want to do more damage? Well, simply Pack-a-Punch! Trying to obtain an orange rarity on your weapon? Well, upgrade it to tier 3 to reap all the benefits. It's a streamlined process that makes more sense for a casual player. Sure, it's less nuanced, but it fits the game's mission statement of simplicity better than Cold War's attempt at the idea. Speaking of weaponry, let's talk about the lack of a unique wonder weapon.
That sucks.
Last time we didn't have a wonder weapon in Zombies was when Zombies wasn't a thing. We've had something unique to call the game mode's own ever since Noctur Untoten. Voyage of Despair, you got a cool triple barrel cannon. Tortured Path from World War II, you have the Blade of Barbarossa. Outbreak from AW, you have the Cell Cauterizer. You have the Cell 3 Cauterizer. You have the Shotgun Wonder Weapon from Outbreak. Why is there no wonder weapon in this game? For specialist abilities, the game returns to Frost Blast, Ring of Fire, Aether Shroud, and Energy Mine from Cold War. And sadly, without any of the upgrades that players could unlock in Cold War, the specialist abilities in Vanguard feel watered down and rather weak. Sure, it's decently balanced, but honestly, it's not fun. I forgot I even had Ring of Fire most of the time because it's just not as destructive as it is in Cold War. What I do really enjoy, though, is that each specialist weapon is connected to a specific demonic god, with more coming along the way. That's a rather unique way to give the game more specific characters to follow. And finally, there's the Covenant system. After completing an objective, players are also granted hearts. Heading to the Covenant altar, players are able to exchange the hearts they've collected for various upgrades and abilities. Much like World War II's mod slots, the altar allows players to collect a total of 3 Covenants, each one offering a different ability. Some of these are very similar to abilities previously, like Cryo Freeze, granting the player the ability to freeze the enemies every few seconds. The biggest issue with these abilities is that it feels like Treyarch is stripping down a lot of the features and reusing them for extra content later down the line. For example, Quick Revive no longer grants the player the ability to revive faster. Instead, the ability to revive faster is now given to the player as a Covenant. Like the modifier effect for Vandalier Bandit and the Tier 3 effect for Mule Kick, where the game refills the ammo clip of stowed weapons, that's also a Covenant here. Some abilities are unique, like every critical kill the player performs, they gain ammo back in their clip. That's cool, but those abilities are trapped behind an RNG system that only hands out 3 randomly assigned Covenants each round, and the amount of times I was given the choice of increasing my melee power was insane. I don't want it. Go away. Sadly, players aren't able to upgrade their respective Covenant manually. The only way to increase its power is to wait for the upgraded version of the Covenant to appear in the Covenant cycle in higher rounds, which is pretty stupid if you ask me. I get the idea that they wanted each and every game to feel unique, but it feels like an arbitrary way to create replayability. I don't know, it's dumb. Of course, how could I forget about the enemies? Ignoring Von List and Cortifex, who sit there and do nothing, alongside the standard zombie, the game also introduces the Tormentors from Mauer, called the Broomschreier. This is literally just the Tormentors from Mauer, and the Tormentors from Mauer are literally just the Sizzlers from Shadow Throne. Why are these enemies still being put into a Call of Duty Zombies game? They're really annoying, get rid of them. And then there's the Sturmkrieger, or the Assault Warrior. Sporting a massive Gatling gun, the Sturmkrieger will flush players out of camping spots using a massive barrage of bullets. A really cool enemy on paper, but the execution is extremely flawed. It's rather hard to approach the foe without the entirety of your armor being wiped away. And if you have a line of sight on it, it has a line of sight on you. And unlike most ranged enemies, which fire very little range attacks, the Sturmkrieger constantly fires the gun at the player, and whenever he shows up on higher rounds, it's just easier to run away from him than to kill him outright. And if I'm not killing things in zombies, that's not a good thing. And then there's the characters. Finally taking the criticism towards Cold War, every single operator is given zombie-specific lines, with a much wider variety, including lines delivered by Von List, Cortifex, Croft, your operator, and even lines spoken by your chosen god. There are also lines given by each objective's respective god. So, you're also given lines by Invictor during Blitz, Sariax during Harvest, and Belikar during Transmit. But honestly, if you ask me, there are way too many characters. Unlike Forsaken, which includes lines given by Weaver, Ravenov, Samantha, Peck, Kravchenko, the Forsaken, and one of the 3 Requiem leaders, Anfang is trying to introduce too many players to the game way too quickly. This makes sense in Forsaken, because the map is supposed to signify the end of a year-long adventure, as each character storyline is wrapped up. But in Anfang, the player is bombarded by numerous voices at every turn. Each god comments on their trial. Von List and Cortifex go back and forth taunting your advances. Croft provides useful info from beyond. Our operators have to comment on every little way they take out the zombie horde. And your chosen god has specific lines commenting on power-ups, perk fountains, the pack-a-punch, getting surrounded, and so on. It's nice at first until you realize this has World War II zombie syndrome, and the characters just start repeating the lines over and over again to no end.
The city is removed. Why can't that thing stay put?
Fools! You came a long way just to die!
My only regret is not blowing you to bits. It would have been fun.
Professor, it is time to bid your toy soldiers auf Wiedersehen.
The city is removed. Why can't that thing stay put?
Professor, it is time to bid your toy soldiers auf Wiedersehen.
My only regret is not blowing you to bits. It would have been fun.
Professor, it is time to bid your toy soldiers auf Wiedersehen.
You came a long way just to die!
Von List constantly talks about how performing these tasks is preventing his plan, but because there's currently no Easter egg quest on the map until mid-December, these words have very little meaning. Like, imagine if in Die Maschine, you just randomly got quotes from Valentina threatening you to not go forward with your plan of destroying Endstation, but those words would have very little meaning because we don't know who Valentina is, what are her goals, how she plans on preventing us from accomplishing our goal, and why we should even listen to her in the first place. This is a problem I have with Von List. He talks all this talk, threatening our characters, but the devs were given such little time to make this game mode, he doesn't even make an appearance on the map, much less actually threatening our characters. Like, there's a radio I found where Croft's like, oh, I'm hiding in a little bookshelf case, I kept myself safe. Yeah, hey, devs, where is that? I kind of want to see where this guy ran off to. No, you didn't feel like modeling him? Okay, cool, I know you're running low on time, but okay, that's fair, I get it. And before I end this talk off, let's talk about a few things that I did enjoy. The game looks immaculate on the Modern Warfare engine. Without a doubt, this is the prettiest looking zombies we've ever seen. And just what I praised Sledgehammer for in the AEW review, Anfang has an amazing looking intro cutscene. And like I said earlier, set up the story in an amazing way. But alas, here we are. I chuckled at the change for Carpenter, because the game no longer offers barricades, they call Carpenter full armor, which is actually really cool and makes a lot of sense. But what's funny is that they still use the Carpenter symbol. And full power returns after its hiatus during Cold War, where much like Zombie Blood's cameo in Blood of the Dead, full power can only be found during rare occasions. Another thing I did really enjoy is Stalingrad's overall aesthetic. I love the desolate vibe of the city, even though the map design is a one-for-one rip of the multiplayer map. And while I like the inclusion of Shinonuma, it's clearly only here to be a reference for past fans, and the location is hardly used and barely feels lived in. In some areas, there's some of that Treyarch polish, but in nearly every other, there's hardly any. In conclusion, Anfang is easily one of the series' worst entries. At least Die Rise had a crew, theming, and unique wonder weapon. Voyage of Despair has top-tier atmosphere, a main quest, and side quest galore. The Darkest Shore features an amazing boss enemy, stellar world building, and great animations and rewards. Please, do not purchase this game. If you're a Zombies player, don't spend $70 on essentially video game fast food. Sure, it looks nice and it was made fast, but the overall quality is terrible, and purchasing this game only promotes this kind of development strategy. Please, folks, I beg you, do not buy this disaster. Speak with your wallets. Don't let this level of quality become the standard. Yearn for more, especially from Activision, one of the most profitable companies in the industry. Real quick, let's go over previous launches. Black Ops 3 launched with Shadows of Evil, one of the series' best made maps, The Giant, and Dead Ops Arcade 2. Black Ops 4 released with Voyage of Despair, 9, Blood of the Dead, and Classified. And even Cold War launched with Die Maschine and Dead Ops Arcade 3. Every single experience listed has entertained fans for hours on end, with an endless passion and soul poured into every entry. So why does Anfang feel so devoid of that love? I think we all know why. Sometimes you just can't hide when a corporate product is a corporate product. Please, Activision, put aside the money for a second and just let Treyarch make the wonderful games that they usually make. Until next time, keep on slaying.